am the radiant life of God. I am the health of God, the strength of God, vitality, energy, vim of God. I am the radiant life of God. I am. Hey, fan, you're the radiant energy of God.
Thank you. It's good to hear that. And I'm grateful for that.
Me too.
Radiating something in you. Well, thanks for being here. This is a beautiful Sunday morning. The sun is up, and it sure is good to be out and about. And I'm Reverend Faye Ann Schmidt. I'm the Associate Minister here at Unity of Chattanooga, for which I am very grateful to be part of this group. It's fabulous. I love being part of something that's so positive and doing good in our communities. Thank you for that. Thank you for being here. Live streamers, thank you for joining us and being with us too. We appreciate you. And I know that sometimes I'm one of those live streamers, so thank you for joining us. Appreciate you. We are live on Facebook, and sometimes when I'm at home and I'm trying to figure it out, I can always go to Facebook and my page and find you. It comes up and it's so beautiful. Thank you, Shannon, for doing that so I can find everything. Okay. You've done very well with that. Hey, hit that like button during the service. A couple of times is great. And share it with somebody that you know that this message will resonate with, whether it's a neighbor, a co-worker, somebody maybe you don't really know very well, but you know that this message is perfect for them. So please share with family. That's how we grow. And we are a message of spirituality and the power of God's infinite love. We are a message of hope. And if you were wondering, what's out there, what's happening in your world, your spiritual world, join us. And you'll find that there is an abundance of joy and hope and love. At this time in our service, we're going to have the opening prayer. Unity started as a prayer fellowship and now has silent unity out there at Unity Village. And we are going to join those folks that are praying all across the world because we need prayer. Not just in our community, yes, but way beyond that. There are things that God can do for our planet, for our peoples. And so let's bring that together in the oneness that we are with each other and with all people around the world. We see peace. We see hope. We see harmony. We are all God's children. And we pray that our leaders, all of our leaders, can work together and do what is right for humanity, for all the animals and plants, for the air and the rivers, the earth herself. We lift up all people to the highest point in consciousness, knowing God is with us doing for us and working through us, for the peace and the harmony that is ours. And we ask that we love each other in the deepest place in our heart, in our being. We just love one another. And as tomorrow is President's Day, we know that the wisdom of all leaders will prevail, that they too seek peace and harmony and joy and love. And so it is. Amen. Today we have Reverend Doug with us to give us that message, that unity message that only Doug can deliver. Oh, I love it. I love it. But first we're going to have our fabulous musician. Take it away.
No. Thank you. God made me. God made me who I am. God made me. God made me who I am. God made me. God made me who I am. I'm a conqueror. I am victorious. I won't be stopped. Cannot be stopped. I'm a believer and I'm an achiever. I won't be blocked, cannot be blocked. God made me. God made me who I am. Oh, God made me. God made me who I am. And I am a conqueror. I am victorious. And I won't be stopped. Cannot be stopped. I'm a believer and I'm an achiever. I won't be blocked, cannot be blocked. And God made me. God made me. God made me. God made me. Oh yes, yes, yes. I'm a conqueror and I am victorious. I won't be stopped, cannot be stopped. And I'm a believer, I'm an achiever. I won't be blocked, cannot be blocked. Because God made me. God made me who I am. and I am.
The Right Reverend Landis Batts.
Oh,
Yeah. Can say more in a song in 3 minutes than I do in a half an hour. Gosh, that's good. Thank you so much, Landis. Wow. Well, for many of us here this morning, attending a Unity church is part of a lifelong journey. And I think for most of us, you know, we started out in another church or another faith, or no spiritual or religious background at all. And for each of us, somewhere along the line, we felt that perhaps there was something missing. And we began to search. Search for something we couldn't quite put our fingers on, something not taught in school, something missing perhaps even in the church that we were attending. You know, from my earliest days in a Presbyterian Sunday school, learning about the life of Jesus and the love and relationship that he had with God, I wanted to follow in his footsteps. I wanted to be like him. But how? You know, where do we start? They didn't teach us how to pray there. They just prayed. You know, there was just lack of tools. They talked about it a lot, but how do I get my hands around it? Well, if you're anything like me, along the way I encountered the writings and the works of mystics who seemed to know things that hinted of a deeper understanding of exactly what I was looking for. James Allen, Wayne Dyer, the Transcendental Movement of Emerson and Thoreau, Norman Vincent Peale, Napoleon Hill. Any of those names familiar to any? Okay, we've been there. We've been on that walk. There were mysteries hidden there, powerful to change lives if we understood and we were able to practice them. And we knew that those ideas could lead to a much greater life experience. It was living with the license of a higher order of beings, as Thoreau quipped. And it wasn't so much about material things, but a life of grace, a life of peace, a life filled with a loving abundance, a life closer to God. Now, in my journey, what I've discovered, and I'm sure many of you have experienced also, is that there have been moments of divine inspiration. Just a thought, a voice, a door that opens that perhaps you didn't expect. Sometimes it looked like a miracle when times were tough. And at the same time, you know, there were blind alleys that we went down and nothing seemed to happen. There was always somebody out there telling you that you were on the wrong path and that you had to believe and follow a certain dogma, and that didn't seem to work either. Times of trouble when nothing seemed to go right. A time when we felt that God wasn't listening, or out to lunch when we called. I'm reminded of Mother Teresa, and she was not a particularly outstanding student in her Catholic order, but one day on a train ride, she had a mystical experience. She heard the voice of Jesus asking her to help the poor in India, and concluding with, "Will you deny me?" Well, it changed her life. And we're all familiar with the work that she did, the standards of excellence that she set in her care facilities, and the lives and cultural beliefs that were changed because of her efforts. But very few of us know about the inner turmoil and anxiety that she experienced, the feelings of abandonment and loneliness that she felt, because according to her, she never heard that voice again. Yes, there were great ideas. Yes, there was support from others where none had previously existed. Yes, there were many doors that opened and many lives and a whole culture that was changed. But the voice of Jesus, that presence, that reassurance that she had felt that one day, according to her, she never felt again. And yet, she persevered through the end. In my own life, I sought out and studied many religious and spiritual paths during high school and college. Became a Buddhist for a while I was in college. Developed a meditation and practice. And I began every now and then, every once in a while, to experience what I would call a voice of guidance. It wasn't Jesus talking. I don't know what it was, but it was kind, it was loving, and it was, well, there was some guidance there. And it really wasn't a voice at all. It was more of a strong thought. And I knew that it really wasn't my creation. It was just something that was there, often quoting the Bible. And one day when I was sitting there asking about the spiritual path and what it was all about, I heard very clearly, "Be perfect, therefore, as your Father in heaven is perfect." Well, after some research, I found it in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5. And there was some research involved because I wasn't necessarily reading the Bible a lot that particular day. But after that experience, I started reading it a lot more. Well, after college, I felt that ministry was the right way to go, and I got an interview with a very prestigious Presbyterian seminary. After all, I grew up in a Presbyterian church. I felt that I knew a little bit about it. I met with the director, who was a very intelligent and learned man, and he asked me about my beliefs and intentions and why I was applying, and listened very carefully as I recalled what seemed to be so important to me. And when I was through, he said, "Young man, you are on a spiritual journey, which I applaud. However, please realize that this institution exists to teach and administer a certain theology, and there are many here who would take great issues with many of the things that you've said. You're welcome to apply and attend, but just be aware." Well, I appreciated the man's insight and candor, and I knew then and there that that was not the path for me. A blind alley? Perhaps, but maybe simply a gentle guidance to go a different direction. Well, shortly thereafter, I read a book about a group in Illinois studying what they called Lemurian philosophy that talked about the spiritual hierarchy of the planet, laws of thought, and many other things that I was beginning to encounter in my studies. I joined them and stayed for 3 years, during which time I learned a lot about the spiritual laws of creation and growth that we all have as our birthright. And we talk about many of those things today in Unity. However, after 3 years, there was dissension in the group. Politics and spiritual pride seemed to be everywhere. And it seemed to me that it was time to go. Another dead end? Well, perhaps. It seemed to me to be that at that time. But as I was preparing to leave, one of the members came up to me and said, "What are you going to do once you leave here for your search for truth and some of the, more mystical philosophies that we talk about here?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And that person recommended a Unity church. Never heard of Unity before. But anyways, I moved to Chicago, got a job in an excellent company. Penny and I got, God, why do I get all choked up about that? But Penny and I got married, and I really tried to start living what I call a normal life. Forget about the gurus and all the philosophy and all that. And then one day, as I entered my apartment, I turned on the FM station. Now, back in those days, you had speakers this high, that sort of thing, and you had amps and all that. Well, I turned that on, and I heard a 1-minute advertisement, 1 minute, for a Unity church. It brought tears to my eyes. And towards the end of it, I remember, hey, wait a minute. I've heard that before. I'm going to look that up. That sounds great. That sounds exactly what I'm looking for. Well, it was the end of the day. It was close to dinner in the middle of the week. And of course, I forgot about the whole thing the next day. But on Saturday, I heard that message again. Got out what we called the yellow pages back then. Okay. Looked it up. It was, there was a service right around the corner in the Ambassador East Hotel, and we decided to go the next day. Well, the service was positive, it was uplifting. The minister talked almost casually about things that had taken me years to discover and understand. And so we joined the church and attended Unity churches in many areas as my business career developed and we moved around the country. And by the way, those 2 advertising spots that I heard, the only 2 I've ever heard. Coincidence? I don't think so. Wherever we went, the churches were great. I started taking classes, served on boards, organized chaplaincy programs, and a lot of other stuff, including a service now and then when the minister was on vacation. And then one day, one of those thought voices said, ministry. And shortly after that, there was 2 other words. It's time. Well, most of you have heard the rest of the story, so I'm not going to repeat it again here. But what I can tell you is that from my earliest thoughts, I have felt a pull of spirit, and I did the work that was in front of me. And when I did that, doors seemed to open. It was a little bit here, it was a little bit there. More understanding and greater challenges as the years progressed. And it's never, at least for me, it's never been easy to discern the various pulls of family, business, the American cultural expectations of buy, more, bigger, better, faster. The fun things that you want to do, especially in your 20s. And then there's spirit, always in the background. You see, it's all together in front of you, and it's yours to decide. But as Jesus said in his Sermon on the Mount, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. And that's what I tried to do most of the time. Throughout my whole journey in ministerial school, there was a constant guidance. There was sometimes a push, sometimes it was an admonition, sometimes just a reminder. And for any of you who've been in meditation, deep meditation, and had your butt kicked, been there, done that, okay? But it was always present. Even the very words and sometimes the books to reference when I was writing a talk. I can tell you many times I'd be sitting there and say, what do I say this morning? A thought will occur, a book will occur, I'll open up, it'll be the exact perfect thing. And then one day, while I was in ministerial school, that voice stopped. It didn't seem to be there anymore. I meditated as usual, prayed, asked, nothing. It was frightening to be that alone and that far along on a path that was so new to me. And I recalled Mother Teresa's dilemma and how she must felt. Well, during that time, we were all encouraged to have regular visits with a professional counselor weekly. And so I shared my thoughts in my weekly visit, and he asked about that guidance that I was missing and that I had received. And so I shared a few of those stories with him. And some were very, very recent. And he looked at me and he remarked, he said, "Well, how can you doubt? It's not Spirit's desire for you to be a robot, or for God or for your guides to call every shot. Once you're on the right path, it's up to you. It's your personal development that's important, and that voice backs away. You've done well. You're right where you need to be. You can now call on the resources that you need, and those resources will be there. It's now up to you to be God's hands in this world. It's up to you to develop yourself into the person that you want to become, and trust that that guidance is still very much with you." He then reminded me of the parable of the talents. Familiar with that? It's in Matthew and Luke. "Whereby the master went away for a while, and he gave 5 talents to one servant, 2 talents to another servant, and 1 to a third, according to their ability." Now, by the way, a talent in those days was a measure of money that was roughly equal to a year's wages. So Jesus is talking about a pretty large sum of money. "Well, while the master's away, the servant with 5 talents and the servant with 2 talents each invested the money and doubled it, while the third servant buried the money. And when the master returned, he praised the first 2 servants, rewarded them with increased responsibility, saying, 'You have been trustworthy in a few things, and I will put you in charge of many things.' But to the servant who did nothing, he was harshly rebuked, and even the responsibilities he had were taken away." And Jesus sums up the parable with these words: "For all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But for those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away." Now, when I first read that many years ago, that sounded very harsh. But then the counselor said, the point is that we are all given opportunities, talents, ideas, and resources, but it's up to us to use them wisely and develop that which we have been given. When we do, greater doors open, as they have for you. He was talking to me at the time. When we don't take advantage or don't do the work, those talents, those ideas, those resources wither and fall away. We all have guidance, but it's up to us to do the work and to develop further. When I heard that, I was reminded of a lady who came up to me to talk after a wedding several years ago. Actually, it was in this area. She loved the service. She asked some more questions about unity, since apparently she was somewhat familiar with it. And after a few minutes, sensing her interest, I recommended several unity churches in the area and invited her to attend. "Oh no," she said. "That's just not done. It's not proper for a Southern woman to leave the church she was brought up in." Well, given the culture we live in, it's sometimes hard to take the next step. And I know for me, with the culture that I've been brought up in, it's sometimes I didn't take those steps either. The story continues. Again, when I was in ministerial school, we had to do a paper, or rather a required project called Credo. It was a broad series of theological questions that we were to simply answer with what we believed, which in turn would be turned over to our advisor with follow-up discussions. It was lengthy, and it was due to just prior to one of our license and ordination reviews. License and ordination, we called them L&Os. Now, they're similar to law boards. In other words, you got to pass them to be an attorney. You got to pass these L&Os in order to be an ordained unity minister. And in other words, those L&Os are checking on your progress in school and your beliefs and your actions according to what they pretty much figured out was established doctrine. Although in unity terms, that can have a wider and deeper latitude than maybe some other denominations. And so when I went to talk with my advisor, he was a longtime unity minister. He possessed a photographic memory and the ability to read 4 or 5 pages of text in about 30 seconds and recall it all perfectly. The man was amazing. And he read my papers, or rather scanned them, it was about like that. And then he looked at me and he said, you've thought quite a bit about these questions. Where did you get this? And I said simply, well, I've had a meditation practice for years. I ask questions and I get answers. And he kind of cleared his throat for a minute and he said, well, in case any of your L&O asks, you can find similar thoughts from Charles Fillmore's last book called Keep a True Lent. It's towards the back. I would encourage you to look it up. Because many of Charles' beliefs changed and evolved over his lifetimes, and some of his last writings are similar to what you've expressed here. Well, I didn't think too much of his comments, but what I found out later was that there was a number of unity ministers who identified themselves as Fillmoreans, which simply meant that if Charles or Myrtle said it or wrote it, then it was official unity doctrine, not to be challenged, changed, or added to. Thank you very much. If your views were significantly different, then, well, maybe as a ministerial student trying to become a licensed unity minister, you might be in trouble. The point here is that with all of these stories I've told you so far, the spiritual journey is an individual one, with insights and experiences that are personal and cover a wide theological range. The patriarchs, the prophets, the mystics of the Old Testament that we read about, those people were the ones who listened and followed through with their guidance, did the work that they were given to do, and their experiences and their perspectives became Jewish law, wisdom, and guidance. It's what's in the Old Testament today, which is also called the Hebrew Scriptures. But here's the point. As religious and spiritual groups become organized and expand, they often become inelastic and structured to continue the beliefs of their founders. Now, that doesn't mean that they're ineffective, for they serve a purpose with the information beliefs that they have and help many on the spiritual path. However, sooner or later, they lose that leading edge for serious students and become stale for those seeking greater wisdom and truth. One of the things that Charles and Myrtle did, to their credit, is they had great experiences with the Bible and with Jesus' teachings. But if you've been with us for a while, you know that they expanded that into scientific inquiry, into other philosophies, not necessarily divergent, but just saying the same thing in a different way. There have been many others that did the same thing. Recall the life of Siddhartha Gautama, for example. Growing up in the Hindu religion that had become highly ritualistic, structured into a caste system, and remote from the everyday person. When he saw the misery that most people lived in at the time, he set out to find a better way, a better understanding, and tried many paths to find enlightenment. One of being in an aesthetic that nearly killed him. Finally, he went inside himself in meditation, and he achieved the enlightenment that today we know as Buddhism. It's a religion, if you can call it that, and focuses on self-awareness, right effort, and meditation, a personal journey. Its lack of structure and organization and focus on the inner journey is what makes it a viable spiritual path for many people today. 500 years later, Jesus was born into the Jewish culture, which at the time was unique in its view of one God, but highly structured with a hierarchy of priests, Pharisees, and scribes, and laden with ritualistic sacrifices and temple taxes. And although there are stories of Jesus' youth, the Bible is silent concerning those missing teenage and early adult years. Well, what we know today from other texts that were found in Tibet is that he traveled to those countries, to India and Tibet, and studied with the lamas and the rishis about Buddhism, and brought back to his people a new understanding of the Hebrew scriptures, a loving and a personal God, our Father, an understanding of personal development through self-awareness, prayer, right thought, and behavior, rather than the sacrifice of animals and higher taxes. A personal path to the kingdom of heaven, as he referred to it. And an entirely new way of thought and being came into being. Christianity developed. If you compare the Eightfold Path of Buddhism and Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, found in Matthew 5 through 7, you'll find great similarities. Charles Fillmore was an orphan raised in poverty and relatively uneducated. Early in his life, he became determined to find a better way and found great hope in the transcendental movement of Emerson and Thoreau, and a developing movement within Christianity which focused on a positive interpretation of Jesus' message rather than the customary sin and guilt that was popular in his day. Myrtle was raised in a more affluent and educated circumstance, and her spirituality, in her own words, was decidedly eclectic. When Myrtle was diagnosed with tuberculosis and given no hope of recovery by the doctors of her day, she studied Jesus' teachings in the Bible and said, well, if he can do it and he said we can do it, then I ought to be able to do it. She developed her own spiritual practice of meditation, speaking healing words to her body, and slowly recovered over the span of 2 years. Charles noticed and began his own meditation and prayer practice, and after about 6 months, developed a source of wisdom and guidance that he relied on for the rest of his life. That thought voice that I talked about earlier, that perhaps many of you have experienced also. And together, using the Bible as a foundation, they researched the leading science and philosophy of their day. They developed the Unity School of Christianity and dedicated it to teaching and proving the truths that Jesus taught, using their interpretation of the Bible and multiple sources of scientific information as well. The point of all these stories this morning, Buddha, Jesus, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, and me to a certain extent, is that each one of us had a great personal desire to find a better way. And each one of us found a guide and a starting point in the spiritual practices and texts of our day. The road was long, the journey was difficult, but the results changed all their lives and the lives of many others. Each developed their own spiritual practice of prayer and meditation, and the insights that they gained were shared and were both personal and revolutionary. What I can tell you from my journey is that there are many paths up the mountain. But as Jesus remarked, the gate is narrow and the road is hard that leads to life, and there are few who find it. Listen, he says in Revelation, I am standing at the door knocking. If you hear my voice and open the door, I will come into you and eat with you and you with me. To the one who conquers, I will give a place with me on my throne, just as I myself conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. You see, every one of us here this morning is on a spiritual journey. Whether we realize it or not, it's a required course, as Jesus maintains in the Course in Miracles that was transcribed in the 1970s. Only the time you take it is voluntary. And free will does not mean you can establish the curriculum. It only means that you can elect what you want to take at any given time. So, grasshopper. Do your spiritual work of study, prayer, and meditation. That's Jesus calling. Follow your guidance and prepare yourself to walk through the doors of opportunity that Spirit will open for you. And don't be disturbed or dissuaded by those who criticize or dogmatically claim to have the only way and you're not on it. And lastly, be assured that the veils of mystery will slowly lift. And you too will live with the license of a higher order of beings. So let's take a few minutes right now and simply let all that digest. And as we become still, as we become quiet, we once again remember a time when we asked a question and we felt a reassurance. A new thought perhaps entered our mind. A thought of direction, a thought of guidance, a thought of reassurance. And maybe we decided, well, I'll just try that. And a door opened where you hadn't seen a door before. And things seemed to work out. And over the next few days, next few weeks, the next few years, that voice has been with you. That thought, that reassurance, that feeling. You've come to know it. You've come to feel the warm and loving reassurance that you're not alone and never have been. And so right now, right here, we take this time to acknowledge that source, to say thank you. Thank you to the guides. Thank you to the avatars that have come before. And thank you, God, for being right here and right now, guiding me, loving me, showing me the way. Thank you, God. So it is.
Hallelujah.
hear an amen out there. Friends, okay. All right. Well, this is the time in our service when we just open our hearts and open our wallets and give thanks for that opportunity not only to be here, but for everything that Unity has brought into our lives. And we know that through your generous offerings, it allows us to put on these services, pay the rents for the building, have wonderful musicians, and maybe a speaker or two every now and then. So as you consider your gift, let's join in our affirmation, which many of you know very well. It's just simply, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. I give in love, and I receive in abundance. So it is. And I think we have an usher right now.
Flow,
Pass the hat.
Spirit flow through me as I open up to be an expression of your unfolding peace. Show, Spirit show through me as I open up to be an expression of your unfolding love. Flow, Spirit flow through me as I open up to be an expression of your unfolding peace. Show, Spirit show through me as I open up to be an expression of your unfolding love.
And so we give thanks for these tithes and these offerings, so freely given, so freely blessed. And we know that they go forward to bless the lives of each and every person here. And through us, through our example, through the radiance of love that exudes from every one of us, they go forth to touch the lives of people in this community and from this community throughout the world. We are so grateful. Thank you, God. And so it is. And we give thanks knowing that these tithes and offerings will go forth to fulfill the vision and the mission of Unity of Chattanooga. Well, we have three very short announcements this morning. Next week, we'll be back online, and our guest speaker and musician is Reverend Christy Snow, who we've had before. Always gives a great message, beautiful music. We also, right after the service, will be our membership meeting, our annual membership meeting. We hope there's a light lunch. We hope that you'll all choose to stay for that. And hopefully we'll be out within an hour. We like to keep these things short. So let's stand now and join in a circle and sing our peace song.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be with God our Creator and oneness all our being. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be
prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. And just remember, after the service, there's food. Please join us for our annual meeting. Nice to see you.